some of the prep questions.
Good evening, Jean. Okay.
Cool. And I think also important, if you have questions that you want to send to me later on that we need to build into the presentations for any looked at, so anything from your assignments, from the mock exam, previous assignments or questions that you have, please share that on all the WhatsApp group or even on my WhatsApp number, and I will build it into the questions, so that we can just get a few of the latest assignments in as well. Okay, so tonight it is a mixed match of questions. So you'll see we go into logs, we will go into inequalities later on, we will go into linear equations as well. So and there will be some other questions as well. So firstly, looking at logs, and I think what is important with this one is, remember, you are allowed to use your calculators. So some of the calculators have this built in that you can work this out. So your calculators, the Casio and the Sharp ones, can do this, and even if it doesn't cater for the fraction, one can always say the 15 divided by 45 to get the number in here that you can put it into your calculator. If, and like my calculator that does not allow this or does not have this function, another way to do this is to say we can change this log 5 and in brackets with the 15 divided by 0.45 over 33.33. And the way we are allowed to do that is through the log rule. And through the log rule, we can basically say that 33.3 or log 33.3 divided by log 5 will give us the answer we're looking for. And then on my calculator and a lot of the other calculators, how it looks like is, instead of log, they name it ln, ln, so we can say the same. So when you use your calculator, we can say the ln function 33.3 divided by ln of 5. Okay, so that is how we will solve it if your calculator does not allow for you to put in log 5 and 33.3. So when I work this out, log 33.3, that gives me 3,5066. Okay, that is not the answer there. And then we divide by log of 5, which is 1,6094. If I get that answer, it is 2,179, which is option 2. Okay, but again, some of your calculators you can put in log 5, and then it allows you to put in the 33.33 or even the fraction. But if your calculator, like my HP, does not do that, this is a way that we will also be able to solve it. To say log 33.3 divided by log 5, and in most calculators there is a ln function, so log can be just used as ln, and then we are able to solve the option or the question. Okay, so that is a log, so very similar, nearly another log. So here we've got log 3, and the reason why I added this one is just that we nearly get the hang of it for once and for all, then we know what to do. So again, depending on what you have, you can say put that into the calculator. Again, I don't have that functionality, so I will say 1073 divided by 7. So I will get log 153, 2857. I'm just rounding it off, and then divided by log of 3. So the top one is basically, and let's just rewrite it, log of 1073 divided by 7. So that is this top part. And then if I divide it by log of 3, that is the bottom part. Okay. But yeah, again, some of your calculators, you can put that automatically in. Mine does not, so I need to change and to basically manipulate it a bit. So the log of 153 point divided by 3 log. So my final answer is 4,581, which is option 1. So again, just showing how to do the log. So again, if your calculator, like mine, does not allow you to put in the log in this form, sometimes the Casio and the Sharp, you're allowed to put in things like this. Sometimes it has those blocks. So unfortunately mine doesn't, but if it has that, that is how you can then substitute that one with 3 and that one with a 1073 divided by 7. Okay, so that is 2 questions around logs. So again, you guys, just as a reminder, the back of your study guide, there is a whole appendix on things that they said you need to nearly know for this subject. So just be careful again, and that's why I've added some of that in our prep. So the preps going forward as well, just if they sneak a question like that into your exam, we have covered it. So what we need to do here is we need to look at BOTMA. So in one of your other subjects, you probably have seen BOTMAS as well. So first we need to work out what is in the bracket. So that is 1 and 5/6 minus a half. That we will multiply by 2. Then that answer we will say 3/4 divided by that answer. And then lastly, we will add 3/2 times 5/2. So first, we're going to do that. Then we're going to multiply by 2. So that's the second step. Third step, we're going to say 3/4 divided by that. Fourth step, we're going to do the multiplication and then add everything together. Okay, so firstly, we need to simplify that. So let's first make everything a fraction. So 6 times 1 is 6. 6 plus 5 is 11/6. And let's change that to over 6 as well so that we can subtract easier. So to get from 2 to 6, we multiply by 3. So 1 times 3 is 3/6. Okay, so that is just, that bracket's a bit simplified. So now we can say, well, 11/6 minus 3/6, 11 minus 3 is 8/6. Okay, we need to multiply that by 2. So 2 times 8 is then 16/6. Okay, so that we've now sorted out that component, but now we need to say, okay, 3/4 divided by 16/6. So the rules that we now apply is to say, okay, well, instead of dividing, we can multiply, but to multiply, we need to swap that around. So we're going to say 6/16. And so then that component is a bit sorted out, but let's just see if we can simplify. So we can't, 3 can't go in there. Okay, so 2 can at least go into 4 in twice. 2 can go into 6 in 3 times. Else, there's nothing that we can do to that. So 3 times 3 is 9. 2 times 16 is 52. Okay, that is not really a great answer. But we've now sorted out step 1, 2, and 3, and that is what we got, 9/52. So the last one that we need to look at is that option 4. So let's do that component of 4. So that is 3/2 times 5/2. So nothing can simplify. So we've got 3 times 5, which is 15. 2 times 2, which is 4. We need to add that to the previous ones. So we basically need to add 9/52 plus 15/4. But again, here I've got 32, there I've got 4. So I rather want everything to be on 32. So how do I do that? 4 times 8 will give me the 32. But what I do at the bottom, I will need to do at the top. The 15 times 8 gives me 120. Okay, but now I can add it with no problems. So 9 plus 120 gives me 129/32. Okay, so now I'm looking at, okay, 9/10, 3/4, 3/4, 1/32. So that looks like maybe a possibility. But let's say 129 divided by 32. That gives us 4 comma something. So at least we know our first number is 4. That's not right, that's not right, that's not right. That we know is not part of the option set anymore, but let's just find out then how much is left. So 4 times 32 gives me 128. So we then know there's only one left. So we've simplified that to 4 and 1 over 32. And then if we look at that, 4 and 132 is option 1. Okay, so that is how we would have simplified that. For the guys that have, again, calculators like the Sharp and the Casio that can work with fractions, what you would have needed to do is basically first work out this. So in your calculator, 1 and 5 over 6 minus a half. Then the second step would have been to multiply that by 2. Then your third step would have been to say 3 over 4 divided by that. And then your final step is to say that plus that component. So you can nearly have made it actually 5 steps to say we need to work out that first, and then the last step is to add all of them together. Okay, so it's not as simple as just some of the other simplifications where you had 1 or 2 steps. Here you basically would have had 5 steps to work out. Some of your calculators can do it, but else it is just writing down on paper, first step, do it, get the answer, multiply by 2, then, so that was our first step. That was the second step. This was the third step. That was the fourth step. And that was then when we did the final step to add everything together. So there is a bit of a process that we need to follow to get to the final answer. Then also just in the final answer, we've now simplified it, but sometimes this can also be your final answer. So just depending on how they want to phrase that final answer, it can also just be that they have that as your final answer. So it can be sometimes that they put that in the final answer. What I've seen, and I think I might have somewhere or tonight or in one of the latest sessions before we write exam, I've seen in one of your assignments once, but so please, again, if you have any assignment questions, pop that onto our WhatsApp group, and I will pull it into a presentation. But there they said which one is not the same. And then they give you 4 options, and you need to pick which one is not equal to this simplification. So then sometimes they do put in that first one, they add the 129 over 32 as an option, and they might even do something where they've broken that up in three components. So it might be even that they do something like that, but I have seen something like that, and I will share it in one of our sessions with you guys as well. Okay, then also from that appendix part, where we now just had to work out the simplification of numbers. The only thing that they can also add to that is to say well, you need to solve for x. So instead of just having the simplification of numbers, they are putting in a variable into the equation so that you basically work with that. But again, it's very similar. So yes, we've got the variable x. We need to solve for x. So the first thing that we will do is multiply out by x. So first try to just multiply out, simplify, then we can move the numbers around and those kind of things. So first let's multiply out. So minus 3 times x is minus 3x. Minus 3 times 1 is minus 3. Plus 6 times x is plus 6x. Plus 3 times a third, so that is equal to plus 2. So everything we've multiplied out on the left-hand side. So we put in the sign and then we just multiply out on the right-hand side. So 4 times x is 4x. 4 times minus a half is minus 2. Okay, so we've done a bit of multiplication. So let's now try to get all the x's onto the left-hand side like we have in our formulas or answers. So minus 3x, there we have a plus 6x, and then we need to get rid of the 4x on the right-hand side. So minus 3x plus 6, so that gives us 3x. Then the plus 4 comes to the left-hand side, so it becomes minus 4x. We still have a smaller than. Then we take all the numbers on the left-hand side to the right-hand, so minus 3 goes over, it becomes plus 3. Minus 2 goes over, plus 2 goes over, becomes minus 2. And minus 2 stays on the right-hand side as minus 2. So let's see on the left hand, 3x minus 4x is minus x. And on the right-hand side, plus 3 minus 2 is minus 1. Okay, so minus x minus 1. So now we see nowhere do we have a minus. So we first need to change that minus to a positive. So how do I do that? I minus by 1 throughout. So minus 1 times minus x is x. Minus 1 times minus 1 is positive 1. Now the critical thing when we have that, when we multiply by a negative number, this sign also needs to swap around. Okay, so that's the important rule in this one is when we multiply throughout with a minus, the smaller than becomes bigger than. So that is what changes when we multiply by a minus. So our final answer then will be x is bigger or equal to positive 1. And if you look at the options, there is option 3. So you would also see that if we have now changed that x or multiply by minus 1, so it's x and the positive, there was not a positive here to say x is smaller or equal to positive 1. Okay, so when we multiply an inequality with a negative, and in this instance, -1. So if we multiply the inequality with a negative, the inequality needs to swap around. So where it was the smaller or equal, it changes over to bigger or equal. So again, let's look at this one. So if I just said multiply this final answer, multiply by -1. So then we will say -1 times x is minus x. We will say -1 times +1, that's -1. Then because we're multiplying by a negative, we need to swap this around. And so then we go back to that answer. Okay, so with all the inequalities, so if you have smaller or equal and you multiply it by a negative, that will become bigger or equal. If you have a bigger or equal and you multiply that by a negative, that will become smaller or equal. If you have just a bigger than sign and you multiply that by a negative, that will also then become just smaller. And the same if you add a smaller and you multiply that by a negative, that will then become the bigger sign. So that is just one of those important rules with inequalities. Let me quickly just check if I can't just get a bit of information on Google so that we just see nearly what the rule is that we can just. I just quickly want to see if we can get. Okay, so this is just the easiest one that I now saw. So again, you don't need to know the rules wise. So this is just. Okay, so that is just something that you can apply whenever there's an inequality that we're working with. So whenever there's an inequality and you multiply or divide by a negative, you swap it around. Okay, so maybe I will look for one or two others of that for you guys as well, that we just put in one or two extra examples of that, so that you have enough examples that we have looked at. Okay, so let's look at question 33. The price of a t-shirt, including a 20% markup, is 36. What is the price of a t-shirt before the markup? Okay, so first, before I nearly work out anything, so the price of a t-shirt, including a 20% markup, is 36. Okay, so that tells me that the t-shirt, before I the markup must be less than 36. So if I again look at answers, there's no ways that a t-shirt before a markup will be 43 rand, because it should be less. So now we're only looking at three options that you need to worry about. Okay, so let's see how we basically now do that. So we can do it in two different ways. So if you do a 20% markup, you basically say that something cost 20% more. So you could say, well, 36 divided by 120%. So that will be a way to get to it. So that will be equal to 30 rand, which is option 3. The other way that we could have done it as well is to say, well, if I do a markup, that means a markup of 20% is a markup of 0.2. So 1 plus 0.2x is equal to 36. Then my x will be equal to 36 divided by 1.2, and that will also give us the 30 rand. So there are two ways nearly to work that out. But the first thing I always do is to say, okay, before I even go into any questions, let's just see if any answers. Let's just see if there's anything that one can nearly eliminate that can't be an option. Again, you could nearly see with the 36, 20% markup, there's no ways that it can nearly be 6 rand. Because by increasing it by 20%, you can't really get from 6 rand to 36. But those two, the other two are very close, so that you still need to work it out. The other thing that you guys will see is, and that sometimes happens as well, is they could also ask you, what is the value of the markup? So then you see, well, if my final price was 36, the price before the markup was 30 rand, then the number of the markup is 6 rand. Okay, so just also be careful in some of these questions where sometimes one thinks of it as a straightforward question, and then they throw in something like just what was the value of a markup, and you think, okay, but I still need to just get the first value. So just be careful sometimes with something like a question like that. Okay, then we have questions on straight lines, where they ask us the question, the equation of a straight line passes through this point and is parallel to the line y is equal to minus 3x. Okay, so parallel to this line. So when we have this word of parallel, then I know the line that I need to write down has exactly the same slope as the one that is parallel to it. So I can nearly already say my line is going to be, and in this instance, I don't know what the y cutoff is, but I know that my slope is going to be exactly the same, and that is going to be minus 3x because the lines are parallel. So already now I'm looking at, again, these options, and I'm like, okay, minus 3x, yes, plus 3x, no, minus x, no, minus 3x. Okay, so at least just by looking at the slope, we actually now could identify which one is the, or which two we are actually going to work with. Okay, so we still need to work out everything. So we still need to say, okay, we need to put in this point so that we can work out the C value, but at least only two options left. So just remember it's the X and Y, so we can put the 4 into a place of the Y. We can put the 1 in place of the X. So we have 4 is equal to C minus 3. So now to solve C, we will need to just take that minus 3 to the left-hand side. So that will become positive 3. So 4 plus 3 is equal to 7. So we've got the value of C. So now our final straight line is y is equal to 7 minus 3x. Okay, and then if you look at our options, here we have y is equal to 7 minus 3x, which is option 1. Okay, cool. So let's, so again, you guys might, in a question like this question, they might ask you, and I will also look at a question like that, where they sometimes give you 1 point, they give you something like n and 7, they give you the slope as, say, -1, and you need to work out what is n. So I will get you a question like this, because I don't know if these numbers will work out, but I will get you a question like this so that we can just show you guys how, when you get to use the formula of the slope, that you can be able to work this out. But I will again get a question like this that we can look at. Okay, so this, you guys can see, was, I think, from last semester. It was one of the questions that was in the one of the assignments of last semester. So here we can also see 3 things. So they give you the 3 equations, then they do something interesting. So they can ask you if those 3 values might be 1, 8, and 7. Then it's interesting because they should then be able to say, if you multiply, but you can now see if you say 1 times 8 times 7, that will probably give you 56. And 7 plus 8 plus 1, or 1 plus 8 plus 7 gives you 16 as well. Okay, so what this tells me is, and you guys have seen it already, that sometimes you get the same question, but they ask it a bit differently. So for one of the groups, they could have said, what are the three numbers? Then for another group, they might say, what is the sum of the three numbers or the product of the three numbers? So they can get a few different things out of a question like this. But we are basically going to look at what are the three numbers of X, Y, and Z. Okay, so again, some of your calculators can do it. There's some nice online tools that you can check while you prepare for the exam how to use it. But let's try and work it out as well. So we've got x minus y plus z is equal to 1. And I'm already thinking ahead. Well, x minus y plus z equal to 0 is your first equation. 2y minus 2z equal to 2. Let's make that your second equation. And then minus x plus 2y plus 2z equal to 29. Let's make that your third equation. Okay, so the first thing I will do is nearly to say, let's say equation 1 plus equation 3. And the reason why I do that is I see here's a x and there's a minus x. So if I normally add those two, the x's will disappear. So then I'm hoping for some easier equation that I can work with. So let's see if that will work. Let me just make that clear that we're working with a 2. Okay, so if we now add together x plus minus x, that gives us 0. Minus y plus 2y gives me y. Z plus 2z gives me 3z. And 0 plus 29 gives me 29. So at least a bit of an easier formula, only 2 variables now and not 3. And then we see, oh, there's also a nice one. Formula 2, I look at that, 2y minus 2z is equal to 2. So let's see, what will I do to make that? There's a y, 2y, so that might be nice to cancel out. So I rather say, okay, let's take that one that I got there and multiply equation 4 times 2. Okay, so if I do that, equation 4 times 2, 2 times y is 2y. 2 times 3 is plus 6z. And that is equal to, now that becomes a big number, but that's 58. Then if we just rewrite the bottom component, So we just rewrite that option 2. So then we can say, okay, let's do that for -2. So it is a bit long, but now 2y minus 2y is 0. 6z minus 2z becomes 6z plus 2z. So that is 8z. And then 58 minus 2 is 56. Hence, we can work out that z is equal to 7. And so then z is 7. We can already check here. There is our z is equal to 7. So we could automatically go to option B. But let's just make 100% sure. So z is 7. So we could put z into that equation 2. So just to work out what y is. So 2y minus 2 times 7 is minus 14 is equal to 2. So 2y is equal to 16. So y is equal to 8. Okay, so lucky we did the z first. And then just if we look at option or formula 1, we could just say, okay, x minus 8 plus 7 is equal to 0. So x is equal to 1, which does, again, highlight option 1, option 2. So 1, 8, and 7. I know some of your calculators can do it. What I also always use is to just check my answers is linear equation calculator. So there's always the one that I love on, and let me quickly open it up so that you guys can just, if while you are practicing and things like that, we know you're not allowed to use it in the exam, but you're always allowed to use it to test answers and see what the steps are. Okay, so or just quickly in this component. So what I did was to say, after I've created this formula 4, I said, take my formula 4 and multiply it by 2, because I'm looking at something that matches my formula 2. So take formula 4, multiply by 2. So formula 2 was y. So if I multiply y by 2, I will get the 2y. If I multiply 3z by 2, I will get 6z. And just also make sure that sometimes when one writes like me, you don't confuse it that it is 32. So 3z times 2 is 6z. And then 29 times 2 is 58. Okay, so now I have this formula 4. I've got this formula 2. So what we will then do is to say that formula 4 that we've worked out minus formula 2. So 2y minus 2y is 0. 6z, remember there's a minus. So minus 2 it becomes a positive 2. So 6z plus 2z is 8z. 58 minus 2 is 56. So then if I have 8z is equal to 56, I divide on both sides with 8. So z then is equal to 7. And then I begin the process of checking, okay, I'm not going to put z into Formula 1 or 3 because I've got more than 2 variables. So I will always put it into the one that has the least. So I will put it back in equation 2 where there's the z, so I can work out the y. And then because I've got the y and the z, then you can actually put it in any formula to get your x value. Okay, so that is how we would have done that. I am going to put this formula or website into the chat for you guys as well, that you can look at it. Because again, what I like about this is that you guys can basically say work out a linear equation so that you can see the steps. So let me just, I'm going to quickly put it into the type it in here while, so it's x minus y. Let me show you on it. So just want to make it so that I can see. So x minus y, I think, plus z is equal to 0. So let's see if I've used it before or if somebody else have used it before. No. Then 2y minus 2z is equal to 2. And then minus x plus 2y plus 2z is equal to 29. Okay, and then we say go. And again, why I like this is that, yes, you get the answer, but they show you step for step also how to work it out. So, and that for me is nice. That so if you are struggling with a linear equation formula that you just don't know how to get to the answers, use one of our online tools to assist you. I've seen in the last week as well, something like Copilot is really a very nice online tool that also give you step-by-step ways how to work out questions. So again, we know you guys are not allowed to use the online tools in the exam, but they will pick it up. So it's not even that we know that they will pick it up. So, but in your prep for the exam, it's very nice if you're struggling with a certain question, put it in one of those tools because it does give you a nice step-by-step. And sometimes it's just one thing that you're missing that you suddenly see where the answer is. Okay, a question on linear equations, but this one, they basically give you equation and they ask you which one from 1 to 4 is the graphical representation of this line. What I normally do with questions like this is I look at a few things. So firstly, I will look at what's the Y cutoff. So I'm like, okay, 10, that works, that works, that works, that works. Okay, that's not great. So I could not, by looking at 10, eliminate any of the answers. But then the second thing is I will look at the slope. So firstly, the slope is positive. So the slope is positive. So again, I think we had it in our studies when we looked at some of the theory component, but a positive slope, how does a positive slope look like? So a positive slope looks like this. So I did not look to work out any other points yet. I just looked at the ones that they gave me, the y-axis. Okay, so that was all. But then, okay, that is how a positive slope looks like. Okay, so sorry, that's a negative slope, negative slope, negative slope. So the only one that it can be is option 3. Okay, but let's just do that and say, okay, well, we now know it's option 3, but how did we actually know it is option 3? So let's see what we can do. So one can do it a few different ways. So we can say, okay, we know that point is 10. So for that 10, the Q is 0. Cool, we got the P as 10. So let's just look at the other point. So if we say that Q is 20, okay, so sorry, Q is minus 20 because it is lying on this side. So let's see, what will P be? So that's 10, 0.5 times minus 20 is minus 10. So P is equal to 0. And we know that that line P is equal to 0. So that is also correct. So we could see then that this line is connected to the graphical representation of option 3. But you actually already could have seen with this, and if we actually just first looked at the slope, we already could have identified that it is option 3. We did not even need to go to the y cutoff or then this point of minus 20 because the slope would have been able to identify it first thing for us. Okay, then a bit, and this was, I'm not always sure how, to what level, and sometimes they try to also confuse one with certain word sums. So we're looking here at variable cost, fixed cost. So that was part of study unit, I think chapter 2 and 3 nearly. So a swimming club provides X number of swimming lessons per day. The club has a daily fixed cost of 1250. When offering lessons, the variable cost is 50 Rand for each lesson given. Write down the linear equation for the total cost of the club. Okay, so total cost we know is variable cost plus fixed cost. They told us the fixed cost is 1250. And then they told us the variable cost is 50 Rand per swimming lesson. So our total cost function will be 50x plus 1250. Okay, so there is our total cost function. If you set 50 plus 1250 and multiplied that by x, there is an answer. If you set 1250 times x plus 50, there is an answer. If you set 1250 minus 50 times x, there is an answer. Okay, so it is not a difficult question, but you need to know what total cost, how you calculate it, its variable cost plus the fixed cost. You should then also, what they're testing is that you know that your fixed cost does not matter how much X increases or decreases. It does not have an impact on your fixed cost. Okay, so let's go into another question. So now, and this is all from the same paper nearly, so you can see they go, there was a bit of P and Q, so price and quantity, when you're going into the cost, and then you go into the minimum value of a function. Okay, so minimum value of this function. So how would you guys have done that? What, if you see that function, what would you do to work out the minimum value? And I think again with this one, there are two ways to do it. So we've done in chapter, what was it, 3 or 4, we looked at quadratic functions. So in quadratic functions, we said if we look at that quadratic function, the minimum value will be at that turning point. Okay, so then we can work out that turning point where x is equal to, I think, minus b over 2a. So that turning point minus b is minus 2 over 2a, and a is 1. So minus 2 is basically 2 over 2. So we sit with the value of 1. So that's one way of doing it. Another way was to say, but to get to the minimum value, doesn't matter what function we have. With the quadratic, it's nice to work out the turning point, but if this was a different function, to get to that minimum value, we need to differentiate. So when we differentiate, so x to the power of 2 becomes 2 to the power, or 2x to the power of 1. The minus 2x becomes minus 2, and then the minimum value will be equal to 0. So 2x is then equal to 2, and then x is equal to 1. Okay, so both of them you can get it. What is just important is this turning point function we can only use on a quadratic. When it was, and I know we've done some of that earlier in the semester, when it was cube, we normally needed to get two minimum values, or minimum and a maximum value. So again, depending on what formula or what function we have, we will need to nearly adapt a bit. But again, there are two ways to work it out. Okay, so how do I know why I need to differentiate? So let's quickly, so let's say I had a function, what is this? Cubic function. So then how to get to the turning points, I will not be able to say that x is equal to minus b over 2a, because that is not, doesn't work. But what I can do to get to that point, and that point is if I get the lines that touches it. These lines that touches it, how I got to that is to use the original, say it was something like that, was to differentiate that so that I will get those two turning points. So the turning points you get by differentiation. Um, the only difference between quadratic and cube is with a quadratic, we also have learned in one of those study units that we can actually, with this formula, work out a turning point. So this was just for me to show it doesn't matter which one you use, you will get to the same answer. I would normally go differentiation. When I see minimum value or maximum value, I will just, that nearly is my trigger to say I need to differentiate. Then it doesn't matter what type of formula, you just differentiate and you will get the correct answer. Okay. Okay, so I want to just, you can see I've got a few. Yes, so let's do this. Because again, I want to show you guys something interesting when we work out the square root. So what I also normally do is let's do it a few ways. So your calculator can do the square root of 4. Okay, so that your calculator can do. So let's just split it out a bit so that So we can split it out into these terms. You can keep it as is, but you can split it out as well. So the first thing I will look at is that 4. And we get the square root of 4. And if we use a calculator, you will see it is 2. But another way we could have looked at that is to say, okay, what times what gives us 4? 2 times 2. So 2 to the power of 2, and we take the square root of that. We will get 2. So normally then what I will do is say, okay, but you've now seen my method, the previous questions. I know already that I'm working with 2. So above the line, it must be 2 and then something to do with X and something to do with Y. So 16, definitely not. 2, oh great, that might be. Expression cannot be simplified, definitely not. And we know that is also not applicable anymore. Okay, and then we have here also 2. So there's 2 options that have a 2. Okay, so now we sit with, and let's just rewrite it. And at the bottom, minus 4 to the power. Okay, so in this nearly bucket, remember there's always nearly a 2. If there's nothing, it means we're looking at a 2. Else they need to tell us it's cube or it's a 4 or 5 or something else. So how I normally see this is, this line is for me a division. So 2 divided by 2. So what I normally do is to say, okay, we take that square root away, but when I simplify, it's 2 divided by 2. And we can do the same at the bottom. I can take the root away, but then it is the original minus 4 divided by 2. So now we've got it a bit simpler. We still don't have something that is linked to option 2 or 4, but let's see how we can simplify. Okay, so 2 stays 2, x 2 divided by 2, so that becomes x to the power of 1. If I look at option, that's not going to be it. Oh, there's a x to the power of 1. And then we divide x, and then it is 4 divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2, but negative 2. So now we see, oi, there's not a negative 2, but y to the power of 2. Okay, so then one thing that we also need to remember is we can write, so if you have, and remember from nearly that first study units, if we have 1 over y, we could write it as 1 to the power of negative 1. So if we have 1 over y to the power negative 1, if we take that to the top, we can rewrite that as y to the power of positive 1. Okay, so what we can now rewrite this to is 2x y to the power of positive 2. Okay, so this answer that we have here is exactly the same as what we have here. So that is nearly again where they could have had both of these in a answer set. They could have done this as well, where let's quickly see how else could they have written it. So they could have done the third option to say if I wanted to, and if I wanted to nearly have it that you need to say which one of the three is not, and they give this as one option, this as another option, and this as another option. So all three of these are exactly the same answer. It's just simplified differently. So any one of these you can actually um, get in an answer set. So you don't always need to simplify it that everything is positive and above the line or things like that. It can be that you can see it nearly as three different ways to get to the same answer. Okay, so again, you guys must nearly look at the answer set to see which one to go for. Um, it's one of those where they can use any one of the three as one of your options. Okay, so there's again not any one of those three are wrong, but it's nearly what do they give you as that final option in your option set. Okay, so let me move that one to next time, because again we are now with a minimum and maximum values. So here let me move that to actually just when you guys go through the presentation that it actually has a nice flow. Um, so here again, find the values of x for which the function y equal to that has a minimum and a maximum value. Okay, so that goes back to the question earlier of how do we know we need to differentiate? Well, we need to find the values of x here. Because it's cube, I can't go and say minus b over 2a. So we will need to take this original formula. Then we will need to differentiate this so that we can nearly say that for that differentiation, y must be equal to 0 so that we can work out our minimum and or maximum values. Okay, so differentiation, the 3 goes to the front, so it's minus 3x, then it is 3 minus 1, which gives us 2. 2 times 9 is 18. Then it is 2 minus 1, so that stays 1. There is a 1, so it just becomes minus 24. X1 minus 1 is x to a power of 0, which is 1. And then if we differentiate a constant, it falls away. Okay, so to find the minimum or maximum, that must be equal to 0. So we sit with 3x to the power of 2, sorry, 3x to the power of 2 plus 18 minus 24 equal to 0. So the first thing I would do, again, I don't like that there's something in front of a x to the power of 2. So I will divide by 3 and see what we end up with. So minus 3 x to the power of 2 divided by, sorry, minus 3 gives me x to the power of 2. 18 divided by minus 3 gives me minus 6. Minus 24 divided by minus 3 gives me positive 8. Okay, so now this is something more easier to work with. We can look at the factors. So we factorize that. So what times what gives us 8? So if I say 4 times 2, that can give us 8. So minus, that will be equal to 0. So we've got x minus 4 times x minus 2 is equal to 0. So x minus 4 must be equal to 0, or x minus 2 must be equal to 0. Okay, so x stays on the left-hand side, minus 4 moves to the right-hand side, becomes positive 4. X is on the left-hand side, moves to minus 2. So our two values are 4 and 2. If we look at it, x2, x4, so that is our two minimum and maximum values. Okay, so again, followed that process. When I saw I need to work out minimum and maximum values, that's the trigger for me that we need to work out with differentiation. So when we get to differentiation, that is when we can solve the 2x values. Okay, so yeah, I think it now flows nicely from this one into this question, the 2. The one thing that I forgot to add to this, so just also be very careful. Sometimes we now know this answer was 1 and that's option 1. Just be very careful. I've seen sometimes where you see 1, you pick 1, and then suddenly this was 2 and this was 1. So again, the things that I don't really like in some of these exams, but just make very sure that you're looking for the answer of 1, and that is by look nearly that it is option 1. So just be very careful that you don't make a mistake with that. Okay, so I'm going to leave the linear equation for practice for next week. Or sorry, for Saturday. I think we will have a class on Saturday. Doesn't seem like anybody is writing, so we will have a class on Saturday. So then we'll look at that. But I am going to share this presentation with you guys tonight as well, if you want to look at any of those. Okay, so here is a bit a different question. So in the previous questions, they ask us to work out the minimum or maximum value. Here we get a formula and we will need to work out the roots. So basically what that is doing is to say we've got this graph and we need to work out what is that x and what is that x. Okay, so the one will be, in this one that I draw negative and positive, it can be both positive, so let's not. Um, and here was the turning point, which was the maximum or minimum question. So there's a bit of a difference. So they're not asking us for this maximum or minimum point. They are asking us to work out the roots. Okay, so with this one, we don't differentiate. We will basically need to work out what is the x values. So we could factorize it, or we can use the quadratic formula to get to the root. So for me, the easiest one, because I'm like, ugh, we can probably, oh wait, let's quickly see. I'll work out the root. So 4x times x, that will give us the 4x to the power of 2. That is minus, that's plus. So I can remember right from my maths, will be something like this. So let's just see if I multiply out. 4x plus x will give you that. Minus 1 times plus 1 will give you that. That's minus x, that's plus 4x, so we will get plus 3x. Okay, you can use the roots formula or the quadratic formula as well, because what we will now need to do with this is to say 4x minus 1 is equal to 0. So now we follow the same principle. We just did not do the differentiation on these points. So 4x minus 1 is equal to 1 or 0. So 4x is equal to 1. So x is equal to 1 over 4. X 1 over 4. So that can work. That can work. Not that. Not that one. And then x plus 1. So that just goes over to become x minus 1. So there we have our answer. So x here was minus 1, x here was 1 over 4. If we wanted to work out the turning point, the maximum or minimum, then we could have taken the differentiation of that. So let's just show that as well. So if we wanted to get to the differentiation part, or to get to that maximum minimum value, we needed to say differentiate that. So we will need it to say, okay, we need to differentiate that. That becomes 2 times 4 is 8x plus 3, which will be equal to 0. Okay, so this one is not really a great answer, but sorry, that's will be minus. So x will be equal to minus 3 over 8. So somewhere here it would have been minus 3 over 8. And you can probably see there's minus 1. So it will be between minus 1 and a quarter. So minus 3/8 probably looks right. Yeah, so that is just showing the difference between if they ask us to work out the roots versus if they ask us to work out the maximum or minimum value. So maximum, minimum value, we need to differentiate. When we work out the roots, we must just solve for x. Okay, so this could have been exactly a question where that is equal to 0 and they say solve for x. So that is exactly the same as working out the roots of x. Okay, so that is our session for tonight. So thank you guys for joining. Yeah, it's not a lot to have joined, so thank you that you have joined for the session. We will have a session on Saturday morning. So our normal 9 o'clock session, we will definitely have on Saturday. Also, I will share the recording of tonight and the presentation with you guys on